What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV here, back again with another Tottenham update. I am glad to be joined by Spurs talk show Sean Butler and Brains McLeod, who you would have seen of a lot today. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it to the studio, but Brains was a fantastic fill-in. He was done a sterling job on the stream, but he couldn't get enough. He came home and he wants to talk about Spurs even more. Big up to both of you for joining us. But don't adjust your sets. No, you're not dreaming. You don't have to wake up. Spurs look like they are about to make an official signing. We are going to start with the news about Danjuma of Villarreal. Obviously, very exciting news for Spurs fans. Danjuma, I'll go through all the latest updates and then we'll talk about it. Romano obviously has given the here we go. Tottenham hijack the Everton deal for Danjuma. He is set for a medical at Hotspur Way. A loan deal has been agreed with Villarreal and he is having medical. Alistair Gold saying Arnaut Danjuma's medical at Hotspur Way is now underway. This was as of about an hour ago. Should go into the night with various parts to these things. Gary Jacob says that Villarreal want £2.5 million for the loan fee and an option to buy for £27 million. And Tottenham have earmarked Danjuma as Lucas Moura's replacement, who could now be set to leave this month. But I think part of this story is how close he was to joining Everton. So close, in fact, that he did an interview on Sky Sports about his move to Everton yesterday. And he was asked about, do you believe Everton can stay up? And he says, I'll do absolutely everything I can to keep Everton in this league. He said this on Sky Sports yesterday. An Everton ITK said Danjuma had already completed terms, had done his media and medical at Everton and was set to attend training today for the Toffees this morning. However, Everton have found out that his agent had refused to send the registration form to the FA, and now the bid has been hijacked by Tottenham. And the Times are also reporting that Everton had already made his announcement video and was set to release it tonight before the deal fell through and Tottenham swooped in. Look, that must be a real, ouch, a sting in the tail for Everton for that. I guess we'll go to Shawnee first because we have Brains on the live stream. We'll come to him second. But Sean, before we get into all that Everton stuff, in terms of a deal for Tottenham Hotspur, a player who can play predominantly, he's actually played up front for Villarreal this season, but can definitely play off the left, has known to play off the right as well. A loan deal for 6 months. How are you assessing this deal?
Yeah, I've come off a live stream myself talking about it. A few people are kind of representing it as a bit of like a B-Tech version of Steven Bergwijn, basing that on the fact that, he plays for the Dutch team, but Steven Bergwijn plays in his position and gets the number one slot. And so, why did we sell Bergwijn just to go and replace him with someone who's not quite as capable as Steven Bergwijn? And I think that's a misnomer. I think I've looked into the guy in detail. I've got this tool where you can see every little zone in on every little aspect of the guy's game. I think it's a no-brainer. I love the fact that Tottenham has stepped in here. I think he can. First and foremost, there's very little risk, right? In terms of the financial aspect, there's very little risk. Even if it does turn out to be a disaster or he just doesn't play or something happens, then we can send him home and not have any real worries about it. It's a 6-month gamble. But if it does turn out, I also think that whilst there might be that option to buy, we could definitely structure Lo Celso as part of any future deal. He's still at Villarreal and still wants to stay there, and Villarreal want to make that move permanent. For me, having looked into him, I think he is a top-class talent. I know he's had a bit of a disappointing season so far this season, but last season he was fantastic. And if you look at his stats, his goals-to-games ratio, his goals per 90, his ability to create things from magic on the left-hand side, his dribble success rates, his ability to do tricky little nutmegs. It's all very exciting. He can do the things that Sonny we would look to usually do and hasn't been able to do this season. And so for me, I think it makes absolute sense financially. And in terms of being able to offer us something different for a struggling Sonny, I think it's going to be a success. And I'm really happy about this one.
Yeah, but coming to you, Brains, as much as it potentially could improve the forward line, considering, he predominantly either plays up front or off the left. We have on the left-hand side, we have Sonny and Richarlison there. Up front, Richarlison can fill in. We have Harry Kane at the moment. When you're looking at the priorities in the squad, do you think, this should be one of the first on the list when we're looking at players to sign this window?
Well, obviously not. Obviously, we'd all want a centre back, like a really, capable centre back. But for a team that has the attacking threat that we have, for it to be as lopsided as it is right now, I think it kind of Sonny's performance has forced the hand a little bit. You know, if someone like every time I'd watched Danjuma in the Champions League and Europa League, every time I watched him, I was thinking like, damn, this guy, you know, and you'd forget that he played for Bournemouth. You'd forget that he kind of had a little rough patch when Bournemouth came up. Like, I would just always be like, he looked like an incredible player. So as soon as we kind of like as soon as it came out today, I was just thinking, you know what, this actually kind of, it fills a blank so much. I don't think Richarlison is the player who should be challenging Sonny. I just don't think he's that player. I don't think he has the attributes to do what we need in the way that we play with the front three. And I think Danjuma does have that. So I think it comes at the perfect time. But obviously, I mean, if you're looking at like we end up getting a Porro, Danjuma, and a centre back.
Yeah, good
For
window.
me, is like a great window. That's
window.
An incredible window.
Yeah, when you're talking about a player who has maybe not shown his best recently, do you think maybe we're getting him at a time where he's a bit undervalued, a bit similar to what like Bentancur and Kulusevski? We got them at a time where the market didn't value them as highly as maybe they should have been valued at the time. And do you think maybe it's very similar now with Danjuma? We're getting him. He's got an age. He's 25 years old. He's not old, but he's not like the youngest player at the moment. He hasn't had the best season this season. He's only started 10 games for Villarreal, scoring 2 league goals. But do you think maybe you put him in a more functioning system? I think Villarreal in general just haven't been the best this season. Do you reckon he is undervalued by the market, Sean?
Yeah, I do. 100%. Sometimes it takes a little bit of luck to stumble across opportunities. I do think it's very beneficial and opportunistic that Tottenham do have that relationship with Villarreal that they've established. There's not many relationships that Tottenham can point to around Europe and think that we can have easy conversations and get things done over the line because of Daniel Levy's natural stubbornness in his negotiation. But obviously Villarreal is one that they seem to have a little bit of history there and things are quite friendly. And I think that there's an opportunity 100%. I think that the player is full of talent. He's at that age now where, like you say, it's not too young where he's naive. He's not too old where he's on the decline. And I think that there's a real, like I say, a gem in there. And given the right opportunity, playing in the right system that would suit him, maybe more so than Villarreal has this season. And he could be a bench player. He can come off and be an impact player, or he can be rotated with Sonny. I agree with what Brains is saying. I don't think Richarlison has. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Richarlison anyway. I'll put it out there. Most people would know that if they've listened to me before. But I do think that we haven't seen Richarlison, play yet in his preferred position in the 9 role. I think that, to Brains' point as well, if you can combine this with a right wing back, player in Porro, which I know we're going to talk about in a minute, plus potentially a centre back, you could then look, even if not this season, if it goes well with Danjuma into next season, maybe you can then sort of reshape the whole system and go to like a 4-2-3-1 if you have a better centre back, and then you can have options where you can see Richarlison playing in that 9. You can then have the bank of 3 across the front behind Richarlison, and then Danjuma could be one that could fit into many different styles, many different formations. And so not only do I think he's a really good player, I do think he's coming at the right time. I think he's cheaper, he's undervalued, but also I think that he could fit into many different systems that we play either now or in the future. So yeah, for me, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting deal. I wonder if we had earmarked it before everything fell through with Everton, because by all accounts, obviously he's pretty much signed for Everton before Spurs have swooped in. Do you think maybe Spurs seeked an opportunity once Lampard got sacked and maybe Danjuma was getting cold feet, or do you think maybe he was one we were always looking at and maybe, I don't know, it took an opportunity to arise for us to get him Brains? Do you think he was one we just sensed an opportunity when it arose, or we've been looking at him for a while?
Was he one of the names? Because I remember there was like a list of, I don't know if it was Ali Gold's list. Was he in that list?
I think he might be. We have been linked because me and Ben spoke about him on an update previously, so we definitely have been linked to him. I can't remember if he was on the list. So, but I do think there was previous links, so maybe it hasn't come completely out the blue.
But I think it's a savvy buy. If you're seeing what's going on, like, another person's fortune is another person's, opportunity. It's like you're seeing what's going on at Everton, a talent like that, I couldn't believe a talent like that was going to go to Everton. You know, it's like they're going to go down. You know, why are you going to put yourself? His agent must have been thinking like, whoa, like, hold on a minute here. This is a savior here. There's very little downside to the deal for them. You know, like they come on a loan. If he just has to show his talent, and then everything changes in his career, you know, and he just swims back up. For us, do we need to see that much from him? We just have to see him come on, beat some players, and we're already like in love, you know? So I think he's versatile in the fact that he, you know, we now have the potential of two strikers who can play instead of Kane if Kane gets injured, God forbid, or if Kane just needs some minutes rest, because he can't keep going like this, playing every single minute. Come on, you know, we've got to give him. And I think when Richie gets up to full speed, he's got to have a chance of starting, you know, some of the games that we should win as a centre forward. And it just like, I just think if even look at Preston in the weekend, we could start this game with Danjuma, Richie, and Kulu up front. I still think that as a front line is incredible. You know, that's still a really exciting front line. Different types of players, different assets. Danjuma, the one thing I like about him, he's got some pretty big shoulders, and he goes in and he's a different type of player to Sonny and to Kulu and to Kane. He has that ability. He can shoot on both feet. He chops nice, you know, equally well both ways, and he shoots. You know, obviously he's more predominantly on I'd say he's more predominantly right, or he scores some nicer goals with his right, but he shoots really well with both feet. So I don't know if we have a player like him at the club. So I actually think he's quite an asset.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I read a stat the other day. Apparently, since the start of last season, only him and Vinicius Jr. in La Liga have scored over 10 goals with either foot during the last 2 seasons. So he's clearly a very two-footed player. In terms of him fitting into our system, obviously he's very quick. He's good he's good one-on-one dribbler in transitions. He'll be effective, and he's he's lightning fast. He's good in one-on-one situations. Do you think maybe he provides something that we don't have, or when you're looking at a 4-player, did you want someone who's maybe a bit more of a creative passer or something like that? Or, you know, because that people are saying that, you know, he's like Zaniolo we're all linked with, who's more of a dribbler. He's maybe a different kind of profile to Danjuma. But do you think Danjuma offers something that we don't have in the squad? I'll go to Sean.
Yeah, no, I do. I've taken a look. I've literally compared earlier on over the last 2 seasons. I don't want to just focus on this season because obviously Sonny's had a bad run, and so has Danjuma, and Zaniolo's injury proneness is difficult. But I have compared the 3. There's not a lot. There's a lot of differences between them, but to make a stake of a claim of which player is the better one in terms of the stats, I know that stats tell one story; they don't tell the whole story. But for me, one of the things I like about Danjuma is not only does he's in the top 10 percentile across all the top 5 leagues, you know, over the last 2 years or the last 2 seasons, for his dribbling and his you know, access to sort of positive creativity. But he's also in the top sort of 4 or 5% for crosses into the box, into the penalty area. He puts them into the danger zone. Now, I don't know necessarily if that's always a great thing with Tottenham, because sometimes the way that we play, there's never somebody in the box when you need them there, because they're always, you know, one of them's dropping deep and whatever, being a part of the build-up. But he 100% brings us something different, something that Sonny doesn't do currently, something that Brian Hill doesn't offer, Richarlison. You know, it's lovely to have players that can all contribute in different ways. And, you know, when the cap fits, you put them in. And like horses for courses, against some teams, he's going to be the perfect solution. Against others, he probably isn't. He's not particularly defensive-minded, looking at his stats compared to the other guys. He doesn't necessarily get back. Even Sonny has more success defensively than he does. And I wouldn't say that Sonny offers a hell of a lot going back either. So you have to treat him for the player that he is, use him in the certain situations. But like I say, for £2.5 million outlay for at worst 6 months, it's a risk that I'm willing to take. And I think that he's going to, especially with the injury proneness and the vulnerabilities that we have up the top. For me, I would much rather this situation happen than go and drop. And I'm not even saying I don't even necessarily believe that the Zaniolo deal is dead. I think there's still a chance that could happen anyway, because if this is to replace Lucas Moura, you know, then Brian Hill could go out on loan or something else, but time will tell. But for me, I'd rather us save the money that we're not spending on this guy making it a permanent deal, or not spending it on Zaniolo in all likelihood, and then save that money, get the Porro deal done, and then hopefully, if Paratici isn't going to prison anytime soon, and hopefully he can cook up something in the centre back, try and get a Skriniar deal done. No, that would be dream world, right? But by not outlaying too much money on this one, you get another body through the door that can offer value, but not necessarily take up too much of the cash flow problem.
And Brains, now with this Danjuma deal seemingly done, with the front line, the forward options, is that now complete for you going to second half of the season? Are you happy with those options? And how much of a difference will it be for Conte when he looks at the bench? He won't just have either one option or sometimes no options when there are injuries. He can now bring on Danjuma, he can bring on Richarlison. He's going to have multiple options he can bring on from an attacking point of view to try and change the game.
Think about just this season when some games have been stalemates, or even when we've been a goal behind, and you're looking at the like, what can he do? Like it's really difficult. What can he really do? Are you telling me we have now Richie and Danjuma instead of Hill and Lucas? I think that's an incredible. That's way better way to go for the rest of the season. And we need to go on a run. So we need to try, like Sean's saying, we need to try different things. People strategically, coaches come in with game plans, and if you can just change it, if something's not working, if you can change the game plan, if you can, especially if you have players in your attack who all have different attributes, that's where you want to be. So I actually think if I was Conte right now, I'd be looking at these players, all different shapes, builds, sizes, strengths, attributes. I'd be like, this is really intriguing for, because then you can set up a different way. Then you can play with a different triangle, use a 3 in a different way. We've been looking for them to play different ways, but he hasn't really had the ability if you're looking at it from an attacking point of view. So that's why I love it, is that it now gives us some different options.
Yeah. Unpredictability, right? I bang on about it all the time. I know the very best teams in the Premier League, the likes of Manchester City under Guardiola, maybe you can make the argument that Arteta now, they're these teams that have so much confidence in their ability that it doesn't matter what the other teams are going to do, because if you execute your game plan, then you're going to do better than them 9 times out of 10, right? You're going to win the game. But Klopp used to be that way. He used to be that stubborn manager who never changed anything. And this season, he doesn't have the squad to remain so predictable, and he's seeing the consequences of that. And I think that Antonio Conte, to a degree, has that kind of arrogance, that ego that's built on the back of his successes elsewhere, and wants to remain predictable, stubborn, do his philosophy and hope that it's enough. But in the past, he hasn't had to deal with a mid-table strength squad, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
And so having the ability to be unpredictable for teams that are, not able to just execute their own game plan and win all the time, I think is a massively important asset, and one that with this sort of signing that Conte hopefully can use to our advantage in the second half of the season.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I wonder if this will go down as a Conte signing or a club signing. Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see what Conte has to say about that. But look, I think I am excited about this deal. I think he is a player that can get you off your seat. He did very well in Villarreal's run to the semi-final last season, the Champions League. I thought in games against Bayern Munich and Liverpool, he was always a threat. Against Juventus, I believe he scored as well. So he's definitely a player who's had some really big occasions for Villarreal, and I think he provides. If he's going to replace Lucas as an attacking option, I'm all for it. I'm just hoping it's not the end of our business. Otherwise, no. I don't think it changes too much. But I think if we can get other options, which we'll talk about very, very shortly, I think it's a deal to be excited about. And I do think it's a clever deal from Spurs, especially because he's a low-risk replacement for Lucas Moura. If it doesn't work out, he's only cost you $2.5 million. And if it does work out, there's a lot of upside to it. So I'm tentatively quite excited for what he can bring to Spurs. And hopefully he can be a player that can excite us. And I think, as you say, like dribbling wise with pace, we like Son, that's completely gone out of his game. So now we've got someone in the squad who can hopefully provide that, and he can be decent when it comes to finishing and getting in on goal. So let's look forward to what Danjuma can bring, and I'll give him a warm welcome, because I do see a bit of negativity about the deal. Oh, it's only a loan. It's he's a player who's struggling at the moment. He's average, all these kind of things. But I'm positive about it. But I understand
things about Bentancur as well. You know, people doubted
Yeah, if you remember, Bentancur was set to sign for Aston Villa. Maybe not as close as Everton were to signing Danjuma, but Villa, I think, had agreed a deal for you with Juventus for for Bentancur, and obviously we nipped in and got it. So just because you're set to sign for Everton doesn't mean he's no good. But just to touch on the Everton thing, they must be sick of the sight of us. We got Richarlison off them in the summer for a deal which maybe under what they wanted.
They pulled our pants down on that one, mate. Come on,
you can argue now whether or not they did, but at the time they probably wanted more. And we've kind of got their replacement as well. They went to replace Richarlison in January, and we've hijacked their deal. So they must be absolutely sick of the sight of us. And I mean, obviously Lampard being sacked, it's not been a very good couple of days.
Tough times. Tough times at Everton for sure. And Anthony Gordon apparently is going to Newcastle. That's the strong links this evening. I don't know how Newcastle fans feel about that one. It's probably underwhelming to them. For what it's worth, I think Anthony Gordon is a future star. I think he's a very talented player. But look, Everton, tough times for them, really tough times. But that's the consequences, unfortunately, of betting the house over the last 10 years and spending 700 million quid and going backwards as quickly as they have. So it is what it is.
All right, we'll move on to the Pedro Porro latest because there's quite a few updates coming out of that today. I mean, we've been giving you the daily Porro on Tottenham updates, if you've been noticing, and there's been literally inching 1 inch pretty much every day, insisting, then Spurs are after, Spurs are looking at, Spurs are interested in, use any sort of kind of adjective you want. We've used it over Pedro Porro, but the latest on this deal comes from Fabrizio Romano. Says, after the Danjuma deal's done, Tottenham have scheduled a meeting on Wednesday to sign Pedro Porro. Their last proposal was 37 million euros, but was not enough. Spurs hope to convince Sporting using add-ons and a player in the deal. Being told payment terms will also be crucial. Tottenham are really pushing for Pedro Porro, and they really love the player, and they want to get the deal done tomorrow, according to Fabrizio Romano. Bruno Andrade saying Pedro Porro, tomorrow's meeting between Sporting and Tottenham will be decisive. Nizar Kinsella from The Athletic says Chelsea are tracking Pedro Porro as Tottenham's meeting tomorrow will likely decide if he moves to Tottenham or not. And Ali Gold saying that there is confidence that Sporting have softened their stance on Pedro Porro and not demanding the release clause. Interestingly enough, Sporting Lisbon do play a League Cup semi-final tonight against Arouca, and Pedro Porro is only on the bench tonight for Sporting Lisbon, although there are some reports that he has picked up a niggling injury. But that is usually the party line when players are very near to transfers. So we'll start with Brains here. Pedro Porro, there's a decisive meeting tomorrow. Do you think we'll find out tomorrow whether he's joining Tottenham or not?
I think it's more likely Thursday's meeting will be the one. Tomorrow will be decisive, and then it'll be like the final meeting on Thursday, and then maybe even trickle over to Friday. I just don't understand how, have they had as many meetings, or is it just like reporters saying that they've had another meeting, or is this the really like this only the second meeting? Because to us it sounds like there's a boardroom and Daniel Levy's just like flying back and forth.
Air miles go through the roof. Yeah.
Like, get his flyer mails up.
Yeah. Climate change.
I think it's interesting that Spurs are inching up and they might be inching down a little bit, but I think it's got to be done though. Like, don't take the piss. It's like, yeah, and I tell you what though, if it does get done and there is money off that deal from where they started out at, then I do kind of think, props for holding out as long and taking them to the wire and getting money off. And I get the feeling that he wants to go. I get the feeling that we want him. Like there seems to be like an agreement in the kind of personal terms type thing. So I think they just got to make it happen now. Like, there's no point getting to this point and then walking away unless there's a complete breakdown in the kind of negotiations. But God, I'd love to see him in. Even him and Danjuma for me would be a decent window. But I'd love to get centre back as well. But what a player! If we get him, what a player!
Just an update in the last few moments from Ben Jacobs, who does the rounds when it comes to transfer news. He says Sporting have repeatedly insisted on a release clause, but growing confidence a deal can be reached without triggering it. Chelsea monitoring the situation, as reported early in January. A hijack can't be ruled out, so Spurs want to move fast. Now, we've just done a hijack, Sean. Chelsea have been hijacking left, right, and centre. What do we? There's been so many hijacks, I can't keep up. Do you reckon, are you scared about a potential Chelsea hijack here, because they've done it so many times already this window and last window?
Am I scared? I'm not scared. No, I'm confident. I listen. For me, I think it's going to happen. Right? I definitely think that Tottenham are going to make it happen. For me, I think that there's 2 or 3 different ways that you can view the Daniel Levy negotiation process on this one. On the one hand, it's incredibly frustrating if you end up paying, almost what the release fee is anyway, the 45 million euros, but you haggle all month, and maybe at the end of it you get away with 40 million rather than 45. Well, not having him in the team over the last 3 or 4 games might have cost you enough points or made enough difference to certain outcomes in our league performances, or potentially in the cup game against Preston North End coming up, that when you reflect back on the end of the season, the amount of money that you've lost in Premier League like prize money, I guess, from finishing, the difference between finishing 8th and 6th or 7th and 5th, regardless of whether you get in the Champions League or not, it would have paid for itself. So I find Daniel Levy incredibly frustrating for the short-sightedness of that. However, I do also understand that if you do just trigger the release fee, the minimum fee release clause, then you have to naturally give over all the money in one go, which is very disruptive to your cash flow. And can, teams like Tottenham Hotspur, they'll figure out their cash flow, their monthly ins and outgoings, weeks, months, and even years in advance. And to have that kind of disruption to something which isn't typical, it can mismanage it and can make a lot of unnecessary frustrations around how much money you've got and what that means you can or can't do with other deals that you might be working on. So I understand it to some extent. Do I think that Tottenham are going to get it done? I 100% think it's going to happen. And I think it's going to happen in the next few days. But whether or not it's worth haggling over or getting it done with that risk of Chelsea in the background, because they have hijacked a couple of deals, I don't think it makes that much difference in the day. And I wish Daniel Levy on this particular point, this is one of the areas where I completely agree with everyone that feels, how badly they do about Daniel Levy, that these are part of his weaponry, his arsenal, that I really hate, and that his stubbornness to negotiate can really hold us back at times.
Statistically, Sean, have you looked into Pedro Porro and what you think he can bring to Spurs?
Yeah, so the other thing I want, listen, he's phenomenal going forward as an offensive wing forward or wing back. Sorry, he's in the top 2-3 percentile for absolutely everything you could possibly want from a wing back across all 5 leagues. 98, 99 percentile for goal creation, for XG, for XA, for shots, for crosses, successful passes. He's absolutely excellent in all things that you could possibly want from an offensive point of view. However, defensively, he is pretty woeful. He's in the bottom 10, 20, 30 percentile for tackles in the defensive third, the midfield third, the attacking third, for being dribbled past or tackling people that are dribbling against him. He's basically rubbish defensively, as far as I can see. But everything that you could possibly want from a wing, when you're comparing him to other wingbacks or fullbacks, he is in the top 2 or 3 percentile across all the top 5 leagues. So he's amazing. The problem for me, the one risk, and maybe this is part of the reason why Daniel Levy is so keen on negotiating on this one rather than just paying it, is because in a world where Antonio Conte isn't around either before the end of the season or next season, I don't know if Pedro Porro works as a right back in a back 4. He definitely works as a wing back, as a right wing back. But I think if you're not going to play him as a right wing back, he's probably more suitable as a right midfielder or even a wing forward than he is as a right back in a situation where you play 4-2-3-1 under a Pochettino or something else. I'm not saying that he can't adapt and mold, but his stats suggest he's so aggressive and so offensive that in a back 4, it might not necessarily suit him as much as he does in a back 3 with the wing back situation like they play at Sporting, and what we will play with him at Tottenham.
Interesting. Brains, you reckon that's something that Spurs will be thinking about when it comes to this Porro deal? And are they right to think about that? Or do you think it's whatever happens at the end of the season, Porro would be an asset to us next season?
Yeah, I mean, no one, if you are thinking about Conte not being there, and then a manager doesn't want to come in and be held to play a style for one player, So I think get him in, but I think you should be looking to get him in lieu of keeping Conte and then giving Conte the options of if you need to play like a really flat back, that 5 and 4, like per se, then you'd probably go with Emerson. You let go of Doherty and you have Porro. If you're really going to go gun ho, just having those two, having a defensive guy. So you want to play back 4, you can still do it with Emerson. But if you want to just go for it, then it's the Trent Alexander problem. It's like you've got someone who's got such an incredible ball. He's a baller. He's got an eye for a pass. He's an attacker, but he's just played in this position at the back on the right the whole time. So then look how it really affected, and it actually messed up a big part of Liverpool's start of this season because they didn't really know what to do there. They haven't 100% players around, so it's a difficult thing to deal with. And obviously, then if you do have a player with a big name like Trent and then like Porro, it's like you're kind of forced to play them a lot of the time because then fans won't understand when they're left out because of that attribute that they don't have. So yeah, I think it is a big part. And that might be one of the things. I just wish we were in a situation where we knew what was going to happen. I think that would solve a lot of problems if we knew who was going to be the manager going into next season.
Or if you're going to have a centre-back coming in behind him. Because right now, I worry a little bit. Even if you get Pedro Porro in tomorrow and he's on the team or in the team against Preston or against Man City, having Perisic on the left with his inability to defend. I'm not saying Pedro Porro can't defend. I'm just saying the stats suggest that he is so he's so brilliant going forward in his defensive. He's in terms of where he sits in the percentiles. It looks as though he would struggle a little bit. He's going to benefit from having Romero inside of him. Perisic obviously gets attacked more down his side because he's got Davies or Longley inside of him. But I don't know. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts about if we don't sign a centre back this window, but you do sign Porro. Do you go up and play against Manchester City or whoever's coming up after them? Leicester, I think it is. Do you do that with both Perisic and Porro as wing-backs, knowing that you've got those 3 centre-backs and only one of them is really competent?
Yeah, and that it's not even about competence, just about being aggressive and quick and strong. And we only really have Romero, who's like on the front foot, anticipating things. He's quick enough to cover ground. When it comes to Longley and Davis and Dyer, they're just not up to it, and that's why I think a lot of the time we don't press high a lot in situations because we're worried about these centre backs being too exposed. And yeah, I think you have a point, to be honest. I think Porro has pace to get back in position, which maybe counts in his favour. But when it comes to playing Perisic and Porro together, I guess you'd have to assess it when Porro comes in, and Conte will have to assess him when to see if he's good enough defensively. I think his pace will count in his favour, but then again, Jed Spence, arguably the quickest player in the squad, and he hasn't got a look in. So
yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how, if and when Porro comes in, does he think that we can play them together, or is he going to have to sacrifice maybe a defensive option to suit an attacking option, maybe, which is what we've seen in the North London derby. I think we played Sessegnon and Doherty together as opposed to playing Perisic in that game. I think he was worried about that, and rightly so. I do think in a lot of games you will be able to play them together, though. Maybe not in the big games, but I think in a lot of games when the onus is on Tottenham to attack, I think not only will we want to play them together, you want to see them together. You want to have those threats down both wings and not have to focus down one side. And 100%. It's going to be exciting to see them. In full flight, 2 wing backs who can actually cross the ball, attack their fullback. So look, let's hope tomorrow is a big day in this deal and we can get it done. I'm a bit worried. Chelsea are circling now, so let's hope we can kind of get this deal sorted tomorrow. But talking about what you were saying before about the manager, we'll move on to Antonio Conte and Gianluca Di Marzio has been talking today on Sky Italia on Conte's contract situation. He says currently he's 100% focused on the present. He doesn't want to speak about the future. That's why talks have stopped for family reasons. His decision, in my belief, is he would like to change, but we'll see in the next few weeks if this will be confirmed as the decision. Look, Di Marzio has been known to be fairly close to Conte. He's got good contacts and stuff. So I take his comments very seriously when he says things like that. Obviously, there was lots of rumors flying around a couple of days ago when he was kind of misquoted by a lot of the Spurs aggregators as saying Conte's certainly going to leave in the summer. But in terms of this uncertainty with talks having stopped, I mean, what do you do if you're Daniel Levy right now? I'll go with Brains first because, you know, a lot of people are saying, look, if he's not going to sign on in the summer, you might as well leave now and Tottenham can just help rebuild as soon as possible. But he does seem to have the backing of the squad. He does seem to be still very popular. Obviously, the fans, as much as maybe the football at times, or a lot of the time, especially this season, hasn't been very good, I do think he still retains the support of a majority of the fan base. So what do you do if you're Daniel Levy, where Conte's put them in a situation where we're kind of playing the waiting game? Do you have to just wait it out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest thing to resolve all these issues is get him a really solid centre back, and if you got a really solid centre back, I think he would. I think if say Conte goes in a decent run in the Champions League, decent depth into the FA Cup, and we get fourth, I still think that's incredible, considering how he came in, the state of the squad, like the injuries, the World Cup year, like. I think that's great. So I think I think you got to back him and got to keep him. But that's if you have a plan. If we get 3 signings in this window, I think it sounds like the intention is there to back him. And if then you're going into the next window, you only really need that at that point. You're kind of like making just strengthening. You know, you're really making it a way stronger squad. So I think it's doom and gloom. And you're thinking surely Conte just walks. If you just view it like, yeah, there's no plan to back him here. But we're seeing Danjuma, if we get Porro, it's just one other player. And then this is looking like we could be one of the strongest teams going into the ending of this season. You know, so then I wouldn't, from everything I'm hearing from Conte, I wouldn't see him being the type of guy that wants to walk away from that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, go on. Sorry, finish. Yeah,
so I think back him. I think you don't come in that start this journey with a coach like that who does a really great thing, gets kind of like kind of miracle like last season for how threadbare we were as a squad, and then this season because he dealt with so many ups and downs and issues and injuries and stuff. I think get everyone recovered, have a good run at the end of the year. I think at this point I'd be looking at it like, I know we're all like doom and gloom. Some people think, oh, it's so bad, but like I don't think it. Now that you get that win out of the way last night, and you're 3 points away from third. It's like maybe we're just
everything's kind of changed a little bit in the last 24, 48 hours, isn't it? That win, if you lose that game, Fulham go ahead of you, and you're like 5 points from 10th. You win it, you create a 5-point gap, and you're 3 points from third. Then you get the Danjuma news today. Then you get the follow-up that maybe Porro's close. All of a sudden, like the clouds are breaking a little bit and the sun's coming through. And all of a sudden, it's very easy to kind of now think, oh, we're back on track. And it's I don't want to call it flip-floppy, but it's easy to understand how, like, when the margins between success and failure are so thin, it's so easy to see how people can violently change their opinion overnight. Like I myself feel a lot happier today, and I've been someone that's saying for a few weeks, like, personally, I've never been that bought into Conte, going all the way back to last season. On the channels that I go on, people that I spend a lot of time with, they'll confirm that I've always had a problem with his press conferences. I've always had a problem with the way that he manages the press or the media. The way I don't like his football. I'm huge, like, for me, winning a trophy, as much as it is important for me, playing enjoyable football to watch is so much more prioritized than I think it is for a lot of people. And he doesn't do that. The fact that we can't seem to get more than 45 minutes out, like when he was after this kind of run of defeats, all of the things that I find frustrating about Conte, and then listening to that kind of the negativity in press conferences, that kind of, it all feels a bit too much. It's exhausting. Like, when that was happening, I was like, dude, if you want to go, just go. Like, just go. Like, we'll be fine. We'll move on. Like, the Tottenham, there'll be a day when Conte has managed his last game, when Daniel Levy signed his last check, when Harry Kane or Sonny have scored their last goal. And we'll still be here as Tottenham fans. So I don't get attached to these people that much. But like now, all of a sudden today, I wake up and I feel like actually, like you say, Brains, right? One class centre back coming in now, and Pedro Porro, and suddenly there's a catalyst that you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you can see good things happening. And you would rather have Conte here than somebody else who, doesn't have that track record of success. I'm not trying to flip-flop. I'm open-minded to any particular outcome. If Conte is unhappy because of the
if he wants to be here, then
if he wants to be here, I'm all for it. Get on board it. I still want him to play better football. Hopefully, he can do that with better players. I still want him to feel a little bit less like miserable the way he comes across sometimes, and I want him to be a little bit less stubborn with his systems and his formations and his tactics and his substitutions and his over reliance on players that are out of form. However, right now, for me, if it's true that what DiMarzio is saying, that he is willing to sit down and sign up and commit, then I'm okay with it, as long as there is a plan. To your point, Brains, as long as the ownership knows that what he needs and what he wants is probably not currently what he's getting from the guys who write the checks. So we all have to be on the same page with that.
Yeah, but it could be an awkward situation where even if we do back him and we do and we could have a decent season, let's say get top 4 and maybe have a cup run, but because he's been through very difficult times in his personal life, losing 3 friends, and his family is in Italy and he wants to spend more time with them, it could just be a case where he just wants to go back to Italy. And if that's the case, then it's kind of an awkward situation where it's not anyone's fault, but he just wants to go back to Italy, and I don't know what we do with that situation.
Well, if that is the case, though, he knows that now, right? It's not going to take him until the end of the season, right?
He might realize it at the end of the season. I mean, I guess you'd probably think,
right? If you're homesick,
we know he's thinking about it. We know he's already said he's thinking about it. It's making him think about his future, but sometimes it takes time to decide these things, what he truly wants. And maybe
I'll tell you what makes it better to decide is if you a couple of weeks, is if you start moving into like 4th and 3rd and you get a player who you actually absolutely love working with, and then you get a defense, those things will shape his decision. If he feels like, oh my God, they just went out and got Skriniar, and it's like, all right, kids, bring the kid over.
Yeah, we're happy. We're good. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're not going to get back, then it's like, and it's hard. And there's a, this fractious feeling everywhere. Then, I could imagine him being, what am I doing here? What am I dealing with? But sometimes I've heard him say that I don't sleep. I work on Tottenham 24/7. I don't sleep. So I feel that he's putting the effort in and he's trying. And even like last night, moving Emerson inside, figuring out a way to get the best out of Emerson in a game. I can see that he's trying to figure out, and he's starting to break away from a little bit of stubbornness, that he's trying to get the best out of the situation.
That was really good to see, actually. A couple of things he did yesterday for the first time that seem to have some impact, and hopefully it's the starting blocks of a little bit more wiggle room within his mindset of how to operate within Tottenham. The one thing I would say before you move on, Sim, is I did like what Gary Neville said after the game. I know Gary Neville, to take him or leave him, whatever, but I did actually. I think he made quite a few good points about Antonio Conte last night, saying like, where else is Antonio Conte going to go that where he's going to get a better job than Tottenham right now? Nowhere in the Premier League. Maybe Atletico Madrid after Simeone's moved on might suit him a little bit more, but with Italy in the disarray that they are in, does that make sense? And also this idea that he hasn't been backed, that some people say, and Gary Neville says he has been backed. I find the whole term being backed very confusing, because it's like a subjective phrase that for me is always used retrospectively. People look back and base it on whether or not he's had success this season. Like if we were to finish 3rd, 2nd or 1st, if we went to win the FA Cup or the Champions League, then he was backed. If he doesn't do that, then he wasn't backed. And I think that we need to define what being backed means, whether it's spend, whether it's specific players, whether it's amount of players. But if it's just an open-ended, broad topic that, that doesn't have any definition to it, then I think it's always open to interpretation, and we'll always end up giving him a free pass if he doesn't perform. And I think that's not okay either.
That's fair enough. I just feel like we need players. Look, when it comes to him being backed, obviously we spent money. And I do believe that we spent money at the time because we want him to be a success. I think we spent money with a view of us improving. But when it comes to having very, like, his squad, his teams need very specific kind of players in specific positions. For example, wing backs and centre backs. If you look at all his teams he's ever had, they've all had amazing centre backs, every single one of them. And he comes to Tottenham, and the centre backs he's got are just not up to par right now. And he did get them playing. That's the thing. He got them playing well for 6 months, but he hasn't been able to keep up. And I think at the moment, that's the big.
He's also said that when he was asked, right? He was asked by a journalist after, I forget which game it was. It might have been the Arsenal game, or maybe the game before that. He was asked whether he needed new centre backs, and he said no. He's happy with the centre backs that he has. Do you think he's playing mind games there, or do you think he genuinely thinks that the players that he has are good enough? They're just not currently playing to their level.
It was in the context of how he was asked it, that if he said yes, he would have been definitely thrown. It was when Eric Dyer made that mistake with the ball squiffed out and then we lost a goal off the back of it. I think if he said, yeah, we need...
Oh, it was Aston Villa. It was Aston Villa game, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think Ali Gold asked it, and the question was asked, it was like, if he said yes, it was going to be like Eric
Dyer under the bus. Okay.
You know? So,
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
He has said since that, he has mentioned that, you can't build things. The way he says things is really weird.
I think the biggest one for me was he was asked about what our top six, why our top six form has been so bad. Sorry, against the top six, why our form's been so bad. And he was asked, is it a mentality issue? And he kind of laughed and he said, look, the mentality of the squad is good. If trust me, if the mentality was our only problem, it would be easy to solve. That's what he said. So that kind of implies to me, he's saying, look, the quality, and he said before, isn't he? He said the quality isn't so high. I think he said that before. I can't remember if that was last season or not. But look,
he answers those questions when he's not being specifically asked about a player, where you can, it can just be, how people twist his words. It can just be made out to say, oh, look what he said against this player. It's like if you ask him that around the time when someone makes an enforced error, he's never going to do that, because you wouldn't expect a manager to throw a player under the bus like that.
Last topic is about Harry Kane. DiMaggio as well, talking about potential Kane talks. Says there are 2 meetings between Spurs and Harry Kane's agent have taken place. Kane is open to renewing his Tottenham contract. Talks between the clubs and Kane are ongoing, which is obviously quite more positive to, what we heard a few days ago when we heard that he's from a few reliable sources that he's open to joining Man United maybe at the end of the season. We know that he has 18 months left on his deal. He did obviously match Jimmy Greaves' record on Monday night, which was a bit of history to become joint club record top goal scorer. Go to you first, Brains. When it comes to Harry Kane, do you think he's going to be here next season, regardless of the manager situation, or do you think the two are very interlinked?
I do change every now on this, because obviously, like, we want him to be here, but then you obviously feel for the player. But then I hate that argument of like, Harry Kane isn't like a world elite player if he doesn't have trophies. I hate this idea that this is where football's at. Like, where someone loves a club, loves being here, his family's here, his kids are not really at the age where you can just uproot them and move to somewhere else, change their school. He thinks about his family. He thinks about the club he loves. He's got friends here. His life is here. So, he must be a dumb guy. People make fun of his intelligence if he wants to stay at a club he loves. I think if he wanted to stay, I'd have so much more respect, that he just loves his club. And are we really going to talk differently at the end of his career? Like, idiots will relate, have that whole thing where you're only rated in the best in the world if you've got multiple trophies. That's all nonsense. Like, people know George Best was a phenomenal player, never really played in a World Cup because he's, Irish, so all that stuff, it doesn't matter. For me, it's like Harry Kane is an absolute legend. He's done what he had to do for this club, and times like a million. So I would just love him to stay. And I think, from what you're hearing and you're looking at his age, I think he would take another extension. I think it would put him in a stronger position, because he extends and then he can still look at, doing a deal. It's just, he still gives, he still gives Daniel Levy like really the kind of advantage there, doesn't he? Like, I mean, Sean will speak more to that, but like if he extends, surely he's still kind of Daniel Levy can still control how much he's going to go for if he ever goes, you know. So I think if he extends, though, he at the moment it's in his, you know, he can be asking for more money. If they say stay for 300,000, he's a 30-year-old. He stay here, break all the records, 300,000, be happy, watch your family grow happy. Why would he turn that down?
But you know, on the flip side, he is obviously turning 30 very soon, not getting any younger. This is probably, you could argue, last chance for a major deal for a big club. And if he isn't convinced that trophies are going to be won at Tottenham, are you not surprised if his head does? I mean, we've already seen his head get turned once, and that was only a year ago, 18 months ago. So is it that beyond the realms of possibility it could be turned again if things really start, if the second half of the season goes really wrong for Tottenham? I'll go with Sean.
Well, yeah, look, first of all, I think that going to Manchester City guaranteed trophies. That ship has sailed. I don't think there's any guarantee of going to Manchester United you're going to get a trophy anyway. He wouldn't go to Arsenal or Chelsea. He wouldn't do that to his reputation at Tottenham. So, you know, I don't, and, you know, does he really want to leave the Premier League and give up? I don't think he's going to win a trophy. Like, he may or may not win a trophy there as well, right? He might do, but he's not no guarantee. So, like, if you were to leave the Premier League to go overseas to win a trophy, then you're sacrificing the Premier League top goal scorer thing, which I do think means a lot to him. If you go to another Premier League club, there's no guarantee you're going to win a trophy. I also think, a little bit in tongue in cheek, but that there is maybe a bit more longevity to his brand. In 100 years' time, if he's the greatest goal scorer to never win a trophy, that will be on a pub quiz question in 100 years' time, long after he's gone. Right? But he won't be, if he's the guy who's...
I'm sure Levy will be selling that to Harry Kane, yeah.
100%, right? 100%. But if he wins one trophy with Manchester United or with Tottenham, then in 100 years' time he'll be forgotten anyway, right? Or he'll just be like one of the guys in the, you know, with the top goal scoring. So there's a little bit of like a reason to, you know, to hang around with Tottenham that I think isn't necessarily remembered. I think also he loves the club. I think he's a boyhood. I think he's going to stay. I do. I think Daniel Levy will find
regardless of what happens then between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, because I think if Conte does leave, the obvious managerial cab off the rank is Pochettino, and Pochettino and him have got a great relationship. Maybe if Pochettino doesn't come back after Conte, maybe if it's somebody else that doesn't have the gravitas or the pull or the name or the relationship with Harry Kane, maybe there's a bit more of a challenging conversation there. But if it's not Conte, I think it will be Pochettino. Both of those guys, I think, are enough of a pull for Harry Kane to stay. And I don't see... I don't really see any other outcome for the reasons I mentioned previously. I just don't think there's any guarantees of trophies anywhere else in the UK either.
Plus,
apart from City, you know. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say the movie of Harry Kane's life is way more impressive. Staying at Tottenham, win or not win a trophy. Not winning a trophy is still a great, phenomenal ending to a movie. If there's like even one more close run that doesn't go well. That's those great endings where it's not about the happy ending; it's about what he learns about himself along the journey. So the movie of his life is way better. What big ending? And as he goes to one team and he wins one trophy and his career's over. Like, how's that?
Fizzle out.
That's nothing. You know, so
I guess the longer it goes on, the more people speak about it. Keeps him in the conversation, does it?
100%.
Yeah, I kind of hear that. So look. When it comes to Kane, I really hope, obviously I'm dying for him to sign on. I think in terms of trying to get a talisman or a striker even half of his quality is a big ask come the end of the season. And I do believe he wants to stay at Tottenham, but we need to give him every single reason possible to convince him that this is the place for him to be. And we know he's had his head turned already once. We need to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I guess the big risk is, if we can't convince him and we want to hang on to him at the end of the season, if we don't want that Kane, you know, under Nuno, and that's what we're risking if he says to us that he's not signing, and we keep him on. But then again, maybe we could give him Mbappe terms, you know, get him to part ownership of the club, 500 grand a week. Just do an Mbappe on him. That's what I do. Throw the book at him.
Give him shares.
Give him shares.
If he doesn't want to,
the manager, you can assign the players. You do it all.
He's got. Listen, if he says he doesn't want to stay, we have. He wants to go, and either you sell me now, or I'll walk for free at the end of 23-24 season. Then I think you have to let him go. And I don't know what Tottenham are going to do without him. Even if you went and replaced him, even if you got someone to pay 70 million in the summer, and then you went and bought an Ivan Toney, right? Ivan Toney, really good player, really good player, but not a patch on Harry Kane. There is nobody that is as good. I heard you guys talking about Haaland earlier, right? Like the comparisons. Haaland doesn't do anything that Harry Kane does, and